Hey again, Kevin Inoue here from Fightdesigner LLC. Welcome to another PewTube. I recently was shooting some video. Wanted to do a little fight scene just partly because it had been too long since I shot anything, and I'm working on a book right now about shooting fight scenes. So I needed to just kind of get out there and remind myself what are the stupid mistakes that I would make, that other people can make, that I can warn them not to make. And I did do a little bit of firearm stuff as a part of that. And because we didn't have permission to use blanks, I decided I'd use either a gas blowback or a model gun. And I figured, you know what, I haven't used these model guns in ages. Maybe I'll give one of them a try. Now, the model guns, for those of you who don't know, these shoot little 5mm or 7mm, depending on the model, caps. So it's basically a glorified cap gun. But the caps go inside these little reusable brass casings, which come apart into multiple pieces, which are easy to lose. And usually you've got some kind of a piston plunger kind of thing. You've got the part that the firing pin hits, and you've got some O-rings in there somewhere that can wear out. You've got a place to put the cap. So the casing itself is a two-piece, hollow through the middle kind of thing. And a little plunger bit. And these all go together. Now, this particular one, is KSC Modelgun M93r. I hadn't used this in years, but it worked fine last time I tried it. But, you know, it's been sitting in storage for basically like 10 years or something. And sometimes brass does corrode a little bit, and, you know, things can happen to make it not cycle as well. And sure enough, when I got this out, I hadn't tested it ahead of time or anything, and it had a failure to eject on the, like, I tried 3 times or something and then gave up. So it did fire, which is good, but apparently with not sufficient power to rack the slide and make the action cycle. So I thought I'd try and figure out, as I clean up here, what the dealio was. Now sometimes I'll use silicone oil to help lubricate the parts, just to make sure that everything's kind of sliding together well enough. I think that's important here. Silicone oil because it doesn't damage the rubber O-rings. So you can see, like on this basically firing pin kind of piece, there's like a little O-ring there. And so I think some of it can also just be that the caps are all years old because nobody really makes these anymore. They're hard to get. So it may just have been insufficient power from the cap. There's another possibility. So one thing I thought I might try is double capping it. And this is an old trick that on the model gun forums they talked about sometimes doing, and sometimes I've had it work and sometimes I haven't. And I did not think of that while I was loading them for the scene, which, yeah, I suppose I can show you in a little bit. It's kind of a crappy little indie thing. Like, it was seriously just me running everything. So me, 2 actors who'd never done film fights before, and about 3-4 hours. So this was a very thrown together kind of thing. This is not anybody's best work. But, you know, like I said, I just wanted to get back into the swing of things and remind myself what it was like. So, out of curiosity now, I'm going to try double capping this and seeing if that will A, set off both caps, and B, let it actually cycle. So I'm putting together, I put 2 caps in there, and now I've got the little charger piece. Push this down. Now I will warn you, occasionally I've had these, as I pack it down, sometimes the round actually goes off when you push it down if you push too hard. But again, these are tiny little 5mm caps, not that big a deal. With that double load, that does tighten up faster. Now, if you were to see these close-up slow motion, you would notice that either, depending on the model, some of them are made to look like rounds that still have the bullets in, some of them are made to look like empty shell casings, and you can't have it both ways. So either you'd see the spent shell casing being loaded in the chamber as the slide goes forward, or you'd see a what looked like an unfired round being kicked out as a spent casing. And, you know, one or the other. Oh, here's one that has a single round still loaded, I think. Did that get fired off? Yeah, it did. So it's, I don't tend to rent these out unless I'm personally gun wrangling, just because they're so picky. The amount of power we're dealing with is so small. The good news is that makes it safe and relatively quiet. The bad news is that means that the margin of error is pretty small for it to actually work. And so it's not at all unusual for them to not really cycle the way they're supposed to. So it's kind of like in some ways, the worst of the real firearms. All the ways that a real firearm can jam, these can too. In fact, they're like 3 times as likely to. But you do get a lot more safety with that, and you do get a little bit of smoke, a little bit of flash. You'll see when I show the video. I did end up CGing in a shell casing and adding in the sound, of course, and a little bit of muzzle flash because, you know, it's really sufficient. But that's true of blank guns too. Sometimes it's just not enough, especially in full daylight. All right, so I've got one round here with a single cap and one round with a double cap. I'll try both, and we'll see what happens. Because when I rack the slide manually, it cycled just fine. So I have a feeling it is something about the power behind the blanks not being sufficient. Or the other possibility, sometimes because you do reuse these casings, they can get a little scuffed up and not as smooth. I've tried to clean these up a little bit and oil them, but there's a little bit of tarnish on this one. I could probably sand away if I were being a little bit better about it. So let's try. This is a spent casing below, just so it doesn't stick back. And then my single round, single cap, and then my double cap. And now mechanically, the beauty of these is they function almost exactly like the real thing. So you've got a magazine with the rounds in it. You have selector switches and safeties and all that. This one can fire a 3-round burst, which is kind of cool. One of the interesting features of the Beretta 93R, plus this little fold-down handle and the compensator. So those are kind of the distinctive marks that set it apart from the more common Beretta 92. So let's see, I'm going to aim this off to this side so the shell casings are easier to find afterwards. Let's see if this works with this double cap. We'll find out. Oh, that didn't work at all. Which means that the firing pin is not pushing it in enough, which is not the problem I had last time. Let's push that down a little bit more and see if that helps. And while they can look very realistic and very cool when they work, this is also part of why I don't tend to use these on other people's sets that much, just because I don't want them getting annoyed with me when things jam up and don't function like they're supposed to, which is almost inevitable at some point with these props. Now, these were really popular back in the 80s when they were new. They used a lot of these model guns on things like the A-Team, you know, classic 80s action TV shows. But you don't tend to see them a lot anymore, and a lot of these they just don't make anymore either. All right, let's try that again. Hey! And that works. That was the double cap. Now let's try the single cap. Well, it worked, but we got slide lock, which is weird because they're still around in there. I'm not sure why that happened. And that was one of the ones I loaded the other day. So, I don't know why this didn't work on set. You know, that's life. You know, sometimes you test things at home, works just fine. You get on set, doesn't work. This is the joy of the mechanical devices that are theatrical firearms. So, I'll spend some time cleaning this out. Obviously, I'm not ready to write it off. It still works. It's kind of a cool prop, especially when you get that machine pistol thing going. And it looks a lot more realistic than some of our blank firing guns. It's got some actual trademarks. Some of these do. Some model guns do, some don't. This one's a KSC. But at least has Model 93R, Cal 9 Parabellum, and stuff like that. So, you know, I have a gas blowback version of this. Once this started jamming, frankly, I probably should have just swapped out, so I at least got good slide motion. But if you can get those shots, that looks pretty cool. I don't know why it didn't work on set, but, you know, shit happens. So, that's a couple of takeaways from there. We've got a new props category I hadn't featured here before, as well as some principles of life, shit happens, that I have talked about a lot here before because, yeah. So, that's this week's PewTube, and I'll cut now to the little indie thing that I threw together. And again, so I'm not a screenwriter, I'm not a filmmaker. I threw this crap together, put the script together in all of, you know, the night before it opened. We shot basically. Neither of these actors had ever done film acting before, although they worked with me on Stage Combat. Dustin and Cody did great, I think, all things considered. There were some continuity issues that I ran into when throwing things together, and this was just a quick, like, 2 or 3 hour edit throwing it together as well. So, not my best work, not something I'm probably going to put on my demo reel or anything, but as a learning experience, worked fine. As a refresher, worked fine. And yeah, the gunshot effects for this, by the way, were just this cheesy little like peel off, stick on sticker thing. So I just stuck one of those little holes on his car and did a little reveal and added a little spark effect in post. Yeah. Unless you have any questions, that is it for this week. I'm going to be in Colorado next week. I'm not sure if I'll get an episode up or not. I might talk about some of the oddities that my dad has out there in his collection, or I might try and Skype in a friend. I've been meaning to talk to MJ for a while. Or I might just not get around to it. We'll see. It's a little crazy this summer. There's a lot going on. A lot I've been working on. I've got shows that I've helped out with fights for opening at Convergence Continuum Theater, at Obama Theater. AIDA just closed at Karamu House. And this book, it's just kind of eating a lot of my time right now. I just signed with Doherty Talent, trying to get all the paperwork in with them for my acting. Been working with Rich Fike on the stunt stuff. So a lot of irons in the fire right now. And some of them are working a little bit better than this one. Some of them are not. As with all these irons, shooting and otherwise, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So I'll see you at some point in here. And until then, play safe, look good, have fun, and thanks for watching PewTube.